We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And this episode...
We should call this one point 2.
...has been cursed. Huge technical issues behind the scenes. I don't know what happened with Jammy. I couldn't see or hear Tom, so that didn't work. We're trying Teams, not by choice, for the second time, not by choice, because I got a wonderful blue screen of death. Hey, Microsoft said they weren't going to do blue screens anymore, but I'm still getting a blue screen of death. So,
you're special. They saved one just for you.
They sure did. So who knows what this is going to turn out to be. It's definitely going to be a very short one because we are super late.
Right. So I'll do a real quick update on the house situation. We have been, I think I mentioned on this podcast, waiting to see if a low-interest loan will come through. Okay. And last night, my wife got a phone call during dinner because why else? Where else would they call?
You know? They like that because they know you'll probably be home.
Thank God they're calling you during dinner, because if they call me during dinner, I am deleting. I blocking the number of because it's always except for this time, apparently it's almost always a telemarketer of some sort of computer trying to get me to sign up for solar panels or something. Mm-hmm. So they called and said, they asked a bunch of questions. Said, this has gone to the wrong department, and it's because you didn't provide enough, the right information or whatever, but which is of course not true. She really has, but this is government and that's what happened. So supposedly today the right department is going to be calling us, or she's going to call them, and we're going to figure out if we qualify for this low interest loan, because if we do, then that expands the pool of houses that we can afford.
Definitely. Yeah.
So hopefully by next week I'll have an update. We did find a house. We found a house that I really like. Okay. It's a new construction. It has what's called an ADU in the back, which is an additional dwelling unit, which is ADU. And that is above a garage. It has its own entrance. It's a single bedroom. It's in a good-ish location for such a thing to exist. Okay. And you can rent it out, and that's the whole kind of point of ADUs, is either they're like mother-in-law suites or something. But this one's above a garage, so it's really, for us, it's going to be a way for us to offset some of the mortgage while we are waiting for the housing market to do whatever it's going to do, so that we can sell our house for enough to pay off this house that we would theoretically buy. So my wife is very excited about anything that involves an ADU that she can rent out. The idea being that, like I said, we can offset some of the costs, but also later on, when our kids are all moved out and we've sort of reconfigured the house, to include a home theater, which would be one of the bedrooms.
That'd be nice.
That the kids could come home and still have a place. And not only that, if it came to it and one of them needed to, quote unquote, live with us, they could live there and have their own space that did not involve. And there's all sorts of other things. My brother's autistic, and someday he may end up living with us, and that might be a solution for him. So there's lots of reasons why she's excited about ADUs. And I'm excited because this house is like only 2 years old, and insurance costs will be as rock bottom as they possibly can be, because it's got all the hurricane upgrade stuff, all the insulation stuff, all the energy mitigation stuff. Energy costs will be low, even though it's got really high ceilings, which also helps with energy costs to a certain extent. So yes, it will. I'm excited about this place. My wife, not as much as me. Okay. But
nothing's set in stone at this point. So
absolutely not. So right now we're just hoping that something will come through. So let's not dwell too much on me, because I could talk about myself forever, because I'm a narcissist. Rob, let's talk about you. What's going on with you?
Oh, just very quickly, just wanted to give the fun update that So my sister and her, well, let's just say husband at this point. They're not officially married, but they're living together and not going to separate or anything like that. So anyway, the two of them, both of their birthdays are in June. And then, of course, it was also Father's Day this past weekend as well.
Right. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I'm sorry I didn't say it last week, but I honestly forgot.
Yes.
But because I didn't care.
We had a family get-together and did all of those things all at once. So a couple of birthday celebrations as well as Father's Day celebration. And then that also gave me an opportunity to give the Switch 2s to my niece and nephews. So yeah, we did all of that this weekend. It was a very nice get-together. Had a very nice time. I'm just kind of, we're on this podcast not really talking about all of the horrible things that took place over the weekend. There were some good things that took place over the weekend, and we're talking about in the United States here, because, I mean, they're kind of taking center stage on things. But then elsewhere in the world, there were massive, massive events that have nothing to do with home theaters, so we're not really going to dig into it. But
we're not going to dwell on those.
We're still citizens of the world. It's not like I can completely ignore that these very important and potentially history and future altering events are taking place. So just in terms of marking where in history this podcast episode is taking place, that stuff is on my mind. And let us hope for peaceful resolutions to things.
Yeah, historians are going to mark the beginning of World War III, but it feels like it may have already happened. And we're just like not really aware of it because we're so in our little bubbles in our little countries over on the other side of the world.
Not a particularly great sign when we have the G7 summit going on. Canada is hosting this year, and the President of the United States, one day into things, goes, I gotta leave. Like, not that I want to leave, or that, like, they actually said the first day
I kind of think you wanted to leave.
First day apparently went really, really well between at that G7 summit, and I don't disbelieve that. There did seem to be progressive, talks going on, like actual stuff happening for real. But the president of the U.S. is like, there's some conflict happening in the Middle East, which is not necessarily a gigantic surprise historically speaking, but gotta go. I gotta go. Is what he said. So. Yeah, that's all happening in the background, folks. There it is.
But we're not talking about it.
Nah. More than that. Long, pregnant pause. The world.
For everybody that's directly affected by anything that we are not talking about,
we're not trying to be flippant about it.
We are not. When you hear me kind of, I don't want to say giggle because that's not the right word. Kind of like laugh nervously.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's the nervous laughter.
It's what it is. It's like I don't even know how to process some of these things.
Me
so
neither.
I'm just gonna concentrate on trying to find a house. That's what I'm doing. My life is very small right now. Some people's lives are very big. Their immediate needs and concerns are all very much addressed, and they can concentrate on things outside of themselves a little bit more easily. My needs. My life is very small right now. I feel very much like I can only concentrate on if you're walking down the sidewalk, I can only concentrate on the next block, like full block of stuff, but where the cracks in the sidewalk are. The next one.
Let's not also chew gum at the same time. That's too much at the moment. I will go back to focusing on the Switch 2, which was fun because there's all these new kind of restrictions now with the way that they've set things up. I think I've mentioned before, but before, when there was just the Switch 1, you could basically own as many Switches as you wanted, and as long as you were logged into the same Nintendo Online account on all of those Switches, then your entire games library would show up and be available to play on all of those Switches as long as you were logged in on your online account on that thing. And it would do an occasional like online check of like double checking, like, is this really you? Is this, within the same household, that you're not sharing your Nintendo account across countries and all that type of stuff. But all that was quite fine. But now they've moved to this virtual game card system, which is that, okay, everything that I own in my Nintendo Online account, there is a virtual game card that exists of that. And to play it on different systems, you have to eject that virtual card from one system and then virtually plug in that virtual game card on a different system, which is not the end of the world, but it does mean that you can't have the same game playing on two different systems at the same time, which actually there used to be conflicts of that before anyway, but this is now ejected on one, installed install it on another. But to do that, the two systems have to be like linked in the account. They link to one another. But the problem is you can only link to one other system at a time, and you can change which system you're linked to anytime you want, but they have to be on local Wi-Fi to do that. So you can't like, so like I have a Switch 1 that I just have left at my parents' place because whenever I'm over there with my niece and nephew, rather than bringing my own Switch, I'm just like, okay, there's a Switch that's at my parents' place and we can leave it there. And that used to be really easy, but now it's like, no, I have to link to that. But then if I want to like link my new Switch 2 with my own Switch 1 at my place, I have to like unlink the one that's at my parents' place and link them together at my place. So yeah, there's just complications on that. And then for setting up my niece's and nephew's new system, it was pretty fun because my niece has a ton of screenshots that she's taken. It's one of the things she likes to do. She shares screenshots with her friends and stuff. And so all of those were saved. Thankfully, I put a micro SD card on her Switch 1, and that's where all the screenshots got saved to. And to move all of that over to the Switch 2, it's like, okay, so the Switch 2 can only use micro SD express cards because it has to be the faster micro SD cards that have the much higher data transfer speeds because everything works a lot faster on the Switch 2. So it was like this hilarious process of, okay, we're setting this up, so log into her Nintendo account during the initial setup, plug in the micro SD express card because that's where games for the Switch 2 are going to get downloaded. But now that you want to move your screenshots over from your Switch 1, it's like unplug the express card, take out the micro SD card from the Switch 1, put that into the Switch 2, move it there, and then move it back to the Switch 1 and put the express card back in. It was like this whole rigmarole process. And it's like, none of it was like horrible, but it was an interesting weekend. But it all got done. Everybody's happy. And yay, Switch 2 all set up for all three of us. Success.
Oh, good. I know they at some point they have to worry about piracy and that sort of thing. I never really felt like the Switch, like the Nintendo games were all that piratable.
There was quite a bit. There's a lot. Yeah. There's
the emulators and stuff like that. But whatever. It's fine. They have to protect their, and I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes they're just like, well, we're actually going to make it almost as long as you are just this one type of user, everything will be fine for you. But if you think outside that box at all, or if you're a power gamer of any sort, like Rob, I mean, who like, I'll just buy two of them and have them in two different places so I don't have to transport them, which is a insane thing to me. Like, that sounds nuts. That sounds like you are a crazy person. When you said those words, I was like,
I mean, the Switch is a very portable system, but the dock is the problem. It wasn't really worth it. I mean, plus once in a while, my parents actually do like to play an old game now and then. So why not have the system over there for them? It's just that much nicer.
Then they make it absolutely unusable for you. All right. I didn't watch anything this week. My wife and I were very busy. We've again been hunting houses all weekends, and then my wife is as I mentioned, my youngest son is up in North Carolina working in a Boy Scout camp. For those of you that have been following along on that little journey, he went from teary-eyed, I'm not sure I can make it, conversations. He didn't actually say those words, but that was kind of the gist. Okay, he was a little homesick.
This is what Tom inferred.
Yeah. To now he is not sure he has the time to call us. Sure. So he's having a good time. He's very, I think, getting very comfortable up there. But my wife is going up there with the scout troop. From here, goes up there every year. So she's going up with that scout troop to quote unquote help, and she'll be hanging out with him a bit. And she needs stuff. And so we've been going to the storage unit looking for things, and going to REI to buy stuff and that sort of thing. Because of things that either have gotten ruined or are lost someplace in the boxes inside of the storage unit, and we don't know what we have anymore. Honestly, it's going to be like Christmas when we open that place up, because
we have.
I'm like, I don't know what got destroyed and what didn't get destroyed. So like, I know I bought new dress shoes because we had to go to someplace dressy, and I was like, man, I don't I don't know if I have any dress shoes left, and I don't want to go. I mean, I didn't have the time to go to the storage unit and kind of try to figure that out, because not only did we get flooded in Helene, but I couldn't remember what made it through the second flood in Milton. So I was like,
the one that took out your storage unit.
Yeah, it took out the storage unit. So I'm like, I don't know what I have left.
Yeah.
So I think I now have 2 pairs of black dress shoes, which, I mean, I'm not going to complain about that. I like shoes. But so that's what we're doing, kind of going through all that stuff. So it's been kind of a crazy weekend. We didn't watch anything.
Okay.
Except for cycling. I think we've been watching the Tour de Dauphine, which is whatever.
Not quite a scripted narrative to that.
No. Go on. What did you watch?
Yes, I watched a movie. I checked out Novocaine. That showed up on streaming. I think it was, I can't remember what service it showed.
He can't feel pain. Is that the thing?
That is the thing. So this is starring Jack Quaid from The Boys, is probably where he's most famously known, and then he also voices Brad Boimler on Star Trek Lower Decks, and does a hilarious.
Didn't we already have that superpower with somebody else?
Well, I mean, that was Kick-Ass.
Kick-Ass, or whatever it was.
Kick-Ass had the severed nerve ending, so he couldn't feel pain anymore. So Jack Quaid's character in Novocaine was born this way. It's a genetic birth defect, I guess you could call it. And so, I mean, they set things up interestingly in that even though he cannot feel pain, and so obviously that's not the thing that frightens him, his whole life he's kind of been a bit of a bubble boy, because since he can't feel pain, there's the possibility that he could, really injure himself, or like just a thing that any of us we'd catch, like a scratch could get infected and he'd never know he has the scratch because he can't sense that pain. So like every corner in his apartment is covered with a tennis ball so that he won't accidentally bump into the corner of a table, or if he does, it won't hurt him, and in a way that he would never feel and would never notice. And then he also like basically just has a liquid diet, because as he mentions in the movie, like he could bite his tongue or the inside of his cheek and he'd never know, and that could get infected. And it's like so he's a very timid, very fearful person who
makes sense.
Basically has no friends, has no social life, but he is an assistant manager at a regional bank. It's like a small bank. It's not a big chain bank. It's like the little regional community bank. He's an assistant manager there. Not much ambition, but there is this sort of new teller woman who is played by Amber Midthunder, who you might know from Prey, or she was half of the Loudermilk character in Legion. That was the first place I ever saw her. Yeah, you remember Legion? There was Loudermilk.
I remember Legion. Yeah. I don't remember her being in Legion. But
yeah, she was the young female character that like swapped places with the older male character, so they were both Loudermilk, but she was the one that never aged as long as, or she only ages when she emerges. It was a weird character, hard to explain now, and it has nothing to do with this movie. But yeah, Jack Quaid and Amber Midthunder are 2 stars, so she's like a new teller, and they kind of are making eyes at each other. There's a clear attraction there, and so the whole thing is. Around Christmas time, this gang of bank thieves, bank robbers, they come in, they rob this community bank, and they take Amber Midthunder's character hostage as they're escaping, because police do show up earlier than they expected, and so they take her hostage, and that, of course, springs Jack Quaid's character finally into action, where he's, trying to go out and save her, and he can't feel pain, so he's almost a little bit of a superhero in this, but he's also not like a trained fighter in any way, and he's made his whole life going through like being very non-confrontational with people, so there is some decent humor that's going on with there. And this movie completely lives and dies on just the charm factor of Jack Quaid in particular, and then Amber Midthunder as well. And to that, it's good. Like this is a fine movie. It's not breaking the mold in any way. It's a little bit paint by numbers. It's got this little bit of a quirk and a hook to it that's going on. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely many people want this kind of movie, right? Kind of throw your brain out a little bit. It's along the same lines as let's see, what was that? Nobody. It's kind of close to Nobody.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet either, but that is definitely on my list.
Yeah, and I personally enjoyed Nobody a little bit more than this one, but it's kind of along those same lines, pretty similar. I think the budgeting felt kind of similar there too. It's I wouldn't call it outright low budget, but this is definitely like lower and mid budget is sort of where it lands. And so my critique of this movie is that I basically felt like everything was one tick lower in intensity than I would have preferred. Now, I think they did that because they were actually trying to keep it reasonably realistic. Like, they didn't want the characters to be cartoons, and they wanted the action to be pretty believable and fairly visceral. And I mean, it's like R rating. There's plenty of kind of, blood and gore that's happening in this movie, but it never goes over the top. And my sort of feeling was, I think maybe I would have preferred that it went over the top a bit. It would have been more fun because they weren't going for a super serious tone in this movie. They were trying to keep it kind of humorous and light, but it also wasn't enough to be like laugh out loud funny because it was kind of a dire situation that was going on. And then it's like the main villain, the leader of the gang, I'm like, I kind of wanted him to be like the leader of the gang in RoboCop. Like let's go to that level. Because he is a psychopath. This guy is a psychopath in this movie. That's not like hidden in any way, but I'm like, okay, one tick up. Like, it's just my feeling. And I mean, that's a director's choice because all of these actors are charming enough and absolutely could have done it that way. And it always felt like maybe the director was just saying, okay, just bring it down one notch. Let's make one more notch more believable, more realistic. I'm like, nah, let's maybe ratchet it up a little bit. But I mean, that's my personal subjective take on it. It's just that to make this movie feel more memorable and stand out and be one where I'm like, hey man, check this out, it's a really good time, I'm like, I would have appreciated it ratcheting up one more. So yeah, to me this is a fine movie. I don't really have complaints about it. It's certainly not gonna like make you rethink your life or anything like that, and it is a revenge tale and all those types of things, and there's a little twist on one of the characters, but it's all kind of paint by numbers. So yeah, it's a perfectly fine time. So I watched one other thing, which is I binged the entire second season of Squid Game, since I'm running out of my Netflix 1 month subscription. And I hadn't watched the season 2 of Squid Game. So this is definitely, because there's going to be a third and final season of Squid Game that was already announced. That's coming out at the end of this month. And it is very much a second story divided in two, because it wasn't a secret. This is sort of ending in the middle of the second story that's going on. So this also doesn't have quite the same intensity or forward thrust momentum as the first season, but I do really appreciate the sort of tone that they've struck with this second season, because this does try to be like, okay, the guy who made it out of season 1, our main character, Gi-hun, that we're following, how on earth would he ever end up in a second Squid Game? And like this provides a very believable answer to that. And also what's going on with like what is happening with detectives and police at this point. Like some of this news has to have gotten out what is going on, and they handle all that in a like, I don't even feel like you really have to suspend your disbelief. I felt like they thought their way through and did a good job in the writer's room of being like, yeah, let's come up with a believable scenario for how we're going to have a second season of Squid Game after the way things ended in the first season, which seemed like a challenge, and I thought they were up to that. But at the same time, the second season is kind of heavier. It's more serious. There was, despite how awful the events that were going on in the first season of Squid Game were, there was kind of a levity to it, strangely enough. And this doesn't have so much of that. This is a little bit darker and a little bit slower and a little bit more thoughtful. But I appreciate that because there are many, many story beats that are repeated. I mean, the Squid Games, like the games themselves have a format and they're not straying super far from that format. So naturally there's going to be repetition, and they lean into that. They're like, there's going to be repetition, so let's give you a different context to this repetition. Let's have it, explore different themes and different thoughts with the new characters that we're meeting, because we're seeing these same events again. There's going to be similar responses because it's a whole new crop of players, but how can we turn that and make it more meaningful and a different take on it in the second season? And they're up to that. So big thumbs up from me. But of course, if you are only watching season 2, then this is not the end of that story yet. That's not a surprise. Season 3 is going to be coming out, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, there we go. That's what I watched this week.
Never finished the first season, but I really liked what I saw.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth a watch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. My wife and I were talking a little bit about Miss Daisy Goes to Paris, or whatever the heck that movie. Miss Harris Goes to Paris. That's it. Whatever her name is. And that's exactly her point was like, I enjoyed watching that movie.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you a thing what it was about. I was like, well, I mean, it's not that hard to remember. She's like, well, I still think about Parasite every now and then. I still think
Sure.
about that movie.
Yes.
That movie has stuck with me.
Right.
That really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I could not tell you what Miss Harris Goes to Paris is about.
Okay.
She's being a little bit facetious there, but that's sort of...
No, but I get what you mean. Like, it's that lasting, emotional, thought-provoking impact, and that absolutely. Miss Harris Goes to Paris is a very fun, enjoyable watch, but it's kind of like, okay, a week later, it's not like you're pondering over it. And,
All right. AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater Navy questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to the website, find our shows, show notes, links to the products and articles we'll be referring, as well as a link to a Flickr album so you can follow along with the pictures. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. You can contact Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His socials is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I did see we got a question from somebody today who was like, "Thank you, Rob, for making such a great podcast. And here's some questions for you, Rob." I was like, "Excuse me."
I mean, I think because there's an awareness that I'm the one reading and rewriting the emails on the topic list, that's not a secret.
It's pretty funny.
Guessing that's why it was addressed that way.
I was like, it was so immediate in that email too that on my phone when it popped up, I was like, it says, "Hi, Rob," and then I was like, "What? I don't even get a mention? I don't even get a mention in the question?"
The day you start, writing the topic list, that's going to change.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do... Oh, did I say mine? It doesn't make any difference. Tom at avrant.com. One of the ways you can do that is go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. And we had 2 people do that this week. We had Mark and Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs. So... Herb and Mark, thank you very much for sending us some PayPal donations.
Yeah, for sure. Mark and Herb, thank you so much for the PayPal donations. Herb did have an additional message. We're not going to dig all into it because it's a little behind-the-scenes stuff there. But I'm not. Tom, did you see that email from Herb?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I read the whole thing. I thought I responded to it, but maybe I didn't CC you on that.
I didn't get a CC.
Yeah, I thought I responded. If I didn't, Herb, no worries.
There is
basically.
I mean, we know Herb is a really, really good guy. We've been, internet friends with him for a long time. I did have the pleasure of meeting him in person once. Got together while he was in the Vancouver area for a dinner and that. So, no need to apologize for anything, Herb. There never will be. But we know he's that kind of stand-up guy. So,
yes,
that's all good.
We also, if you want to support us monthly, you can sign up to become one of our patrons on patreon.com/AVRant podcast. That's every month. They'll take some money from you and give most of it to us. Currently, we have 131 patrons. Thank you very much.
That is right. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to our 131 patrons over there.
We got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from a number of listeners, including Leighton, Matt, Henry, and Julian. Thank you for thanking us.
That is right. I'll say the names one more time. We got Leighton, Matt, Henry, and Julian this week. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement because we really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
In the news this week, for everyone noticing that the Nintendo Switch 2 looks, well, kind of crappy if you allow it to output HDR on a TV rather than its own display in portable mode, Vincent Teoh from the HDTV Test has come to the rescue. With his resources for accurately measuring displays at his disposal, Vincent has confirmed that you definitely need to make changes in the Adjust HDR settings menu. I guess that's on the Switch 2.
Oh, on the Switch 2, it has, you go down to the display settings in the settings menu, and there is right down at the bottom something that says Adjust HDR.
All right, but the instructions and the images that they put on the screen are not actually very helpful at all. And for some reason, Nintendo has provided an insanely high number of adjustment steps to the point where you would surely think you're doing something wrong unless you have the ability to measure the way that Vincent does.
And I experienced this firsthand because actually the first time that I played this on a TV was over at my parents' place. They have an LG OLED. It's an older one at this point, but it absolutely does HDR10, which is what the Switch 2 outputs. And I hooked it up there, turned on the HDR, playing some Mario Kart World. I'm like, yeah, that looks, not only does it look too dark, it also looks like not high contrast, like lower than standard dynamic range contrast, and then also dimmer overall than it should. So I went into the adjust HDR, and I'm like clicking up and down on the little slider menu, and I'm like, this is just not changing the way that it should. I don't know what's going on.
I've clicked a lot and it looks the same, and that makes me afraid, and now I wish I hadn't started clicking to begin with.
Or it's like,
kind of my thought
yeah,
process.
it all got brighter, but it still looks low in contrast overall, and it's like, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, so I just settled on something that was like viewable, and we went from there. But yes, hearing what Vincent had to say about this, I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, Vincent, for confirming things that I wasn't able to measure, but I knew something was wrong just looking at it with me eyeballs.
Right. Okay. So his entire video is worth watching from beginning to end to fully understand exactly what's going on.
And we will link to it in our show notes. We'll have a link to his video. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. But if you just want to cut to the chase, he provided a very handy chart if you happen to already know your TV's peak brightness level. So we'll have that chart on our Flickr album. We also, if you go to the YouTube version of this and find this spot, it will be on the screen.
Sure.
Where you can press pause.
But also check out Vincent's own video, because that's
sure.
where I've stolen this from.
Right. Well, we're crediting him. That's fine.
We're absolutely
and
crediting
we're
him. But
back.
Yeah, no, I just give him the click as well. Yeah.
So to give you an idea, if you have 1,000 nits peak brightness, and I don't know what these other two things are. But,
so this is the setting itself in the Switch 2's Adjust HDR settings. The first thing that pops up, it's a fairly typical test pattern where there's a small white box on the screen, and then there are these two sort of black sunburst patterns, and you're supposed to click up on that test pattern until the sunburst on the right side of the rectangle disappears, and the sunburst on the left-hand side is still visible. And that is supposed to be your HDR adjustment for peak white light output. And that's the one where I was like, I'm clicking up and it ain't changing. And then I just held the button down and it like zoomed way up too far and both of them disappeared. And then I'm like clicking back down and I'm like, still ain't changing. I'm like, what the heck is going on? But if you take a look at some of these numbers in this chart, it explains why clicking down maybe 10 times wasn't making the sort of visible difference I was expecting.
So for 1,000 nits, you want to click up or away from maximum, whatever, or away from the minimum. So click up 58 times.
Yeah, for just a standard 1,000 nit. And then if you have a display that can do 4,000 nits, it's 205 clicks.
There's no way I can Let me explain to you how my why I don't like going to physical therapy. I don't mind going to physical therapy. What I don't like, and this is why I don't work out in gyms either, one of the many reasons, is because I cannot count. I cannot count in my head without getting lost. Like my brain will, as I'm counting, I will start thinking about other numbers and it'll throw me off. It's inevitable. There's no way I'm getting to 205 accurately. Yeah, no. I have a 0% chance of getting to 205.
And these days
accurately.
You might have a display that can do 4,000 nits peak. That is absolutely not out of the question.
58 is stupid.
58 is ridiculous. Well, because I mean, like on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, it's like 25 clicks total, like for the entire scaler. You know, I don't know if that's exactly, but it's something around that. It's like 20 or 25 clicks total. And so I was expecting something kind of similar on the Switch too. And it's like, no, you're beyond double that for a standard 1,000 nit display. And then there's a second adjustment to be made.
You know how this happens. And the way this happens is they took like just find the cheapest display you can and you know, the clicks that you would need to get to make a difference there to get it accurately, like that smallest a number or, you know, whatever, in order to get there was, you know, way down. And they said, okay, well, that's the interval. Maybe it's the most expensive display. That's the interval. We'll just make that the interval for everything. And everybody said, okay. And then they walked away and nobody went, wait, huh?
Yeah.
Do you realize that for a regular old display, this is going to be like
this was like an engineering decision, not a customer service decision for sure.
There's some engineer who's just like patting themselves on the back. We're so accurate. You could set this thing up however you want. No matter what display's out there, there's a perfect number of clicks for you. Mm-hmm. It might be 1 million, but it's there.
But the second part here.
Yeah. So as Am I reading the
Yes,
next?
yeah.
Okay. So as Vincent explains in this video, there's a second adjustment setting that you can access on the Switch 2, and by default is pegged at its highest setting, which is, of course, way too high. But that too high setting, ironically, makes the image on the screen look too dark.
Yeah.
So adjusting things according to Vincent's instructions is very helpful indeed.
And the instructions for how to get to the second test pattern, which is just a series of title screens from their games. So it's just like screenshots, title screens. So it's not like a true test pattern. But yeah, so the instructions on how to make that show up does show up on screen, but it's like this little thing at the bottom. It's like press and hold the Y button for, the other adjustment. And then the slider is there and it's already all the way up to the top. And you're thinking, the reason I'm in here is because the image that I'm seeing on screen looks a bit too dark, but this slider is already all the way up at the top, and it is not intuitive to think my image overall looks too dim, so I'm going to lower the slider. That's just not intuitive in that way. But worse than that, as Vincent explains very well in his video, when you change the first test pattern, those 2 starburst patterns on the small white rectangle, when you change the number of clicks in that first test pattern, it alters the number of clicks you have to make in the second test pattern. So you can't just go to that second test pattern and adjust the slider to where that looks correct and then go back and change the first test pattern. You have to go back and forth to find the correct combination. So just look at Vincent's chart, because good luck to you trying to figure that out on your own. It is a situation.
All right. Last week we talked about HSU's brand new D15-Chimera, whatever, SC SuperCharger, dual 15-inch subwoofer model that's currently available for pre-order. After we finished recording last week, HSU posted a helpful video on their website. It's on YouTube video that shows you the full unboxing process and then the procedure for removing the amplifier from the sealed D15 subwoofer unit, removing a dummy plate that's installed on the bottom of the D15 unit, putting the amplifier seemingly upside down where the dummy plate used to be, and then mounting the newly vented D15 on top of the quad-ported SuperCharger unit. So if you were all confused about how this 2-piece ported subwoofer all fits together, check out the video. It'll all be made clear. So there you go.
Yeah, so this was definitely helpful. I think necessary, because just trying to describe it in words is not the clearest thing, but once you see the video being done. And I was a little bit confused because I thought that once you removed the amplifier and set the first unit on top of the SuperCharger unit, that the amplifier got installed onto the SuperCharger, but that is not the case. The amplifier always remains installed on the D15 sealed unit, but you just change its location. This might also be something that you want to do if you're simply turning the sealed unit on its side so that it is not so tall anymore, because by default it's 18 inches square footprint and then almost 30 inches tall by default. If you just wanted to make it like an 18 by 30 inch footprint and then 18 inches tall, you could put the amplifier onto the bottom by default and then move that dummy plate onto the top side now and cover in the hole that way and keep it sealed. But yeah, the way that you're doing things with the SuperCharger, you're taking the amplifier out from where it is normally. That opens up a big hole on the 18 by 30 inch side, and that gets lifted. It's 170-pound weight, something like that. It's well over 100 pounds anyway, so I don't think you want to try and do this one by yourself. But that just all gets aligned on top of the SuperCharger, and the SuperCharger can face either way. You can either have the ports firing forward or backward. It doesn't make any difference there. The cutout is large enough to support it being oriented in either direction.
Comments. Sasi reached out to Sofabaton again regarding the X2 touchscreen universal remote that we're all looking forward to, apparently.
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Well, yeah. You look forward to it.
I want that X2.
He has to admit that some doubts are creeping into his mind now. They've always replied to his emails, and the job title in their email signature has been Director-International Sales each time, but with a different name. So how many directors of international sales could they possibly have? Apparently a lot.
It seems so, yeah.
And the target for this release date keeps getting pushed back and always seems to perpetually be 2 or more months away. We're after CES 2024, they said April. In January, they said May. And you heard June from them when he asked in March. And now they're saying August. So his confidence is shaken. Are we still holding out hope? Until I have a product in hand it's all vaporware as far as
Sure.
I'm concerned. I mean, so far they've been good at releasing what they say they're releasing.
Yeah.
If they're running into production issues or hardware issues or whatever, maybe the production is ready. Not production, but they have everything ready to go, except that they're tweaking the final designs or whatever, or the software. They want to make sure it works before they start putting it out. That could be it. It could be that they've got it perfectly designed and it's ready to go, but the manufacturing end of it is like, yeah, we're going to have it ready in 2 months, and they just keep pushing them back. So who knows what could be happening
there was also quite the, when it comes to products that are manufactured in China, which this definitely is, disruption in terms of, are we actually going to ship this thing over when there were over 100% tariffs in place for a time, which has then come back down, but there are still sizable tariffs in place. So that is not Sofabaton's fault, that side of things. And that definitely could have impacted their choice of, we were going to get these things on a container ship, but now we're going to hold off and wait and see what happens with this tariff situation, because they wouldn't be the only company to have done that.
So for those of you that... and I don't have great insights into all of this, but I work in the bike industry, and the bike industry, of course, is really heavily affected by this as well, because so many things are shipped over. And parts are not quite as bad, but full bikes, which are many times assembled in other countries, and put into a box and shipped over here to be the final assembly to be done. Which is how you buy them from Amazon.
Yeah.
You get them. It's no different than what we get at the bike shop. We get it in the box. We have to put it together. We just do a lot better job than you do. And that's, if somebody sent me a car with no steering wheel, with the steering wheel in the box on the side, I assume that the mechanic at the in my local shop could put that steering wheel on better than I could, in some way. But talking to our distributor, what they have started doing is because the problem is you don't, the tariff doesn't affect you until it goes through customs, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
So they're like, we can't put this stuff on a ship until we know definitively that when it gets here, we can afford to take it off that ship.
Yeah, I mean, there was a spell of time there where there were container ships just out in the ocean some miles off of the coast, off of the port, because they didn't want to land and unload their stuff and have it go through customs. And there were stories of some containers were just dumped into the ocean because the company said, there's absolutely no way we're going to bring this in. The ship can't just stay out there circling or anchored off the coast. And they're like, well, we got to get this ship out of here. And the containers aren't going to be brought through the port, so they just dumped them into the ocean. That happened. So
one of our distributors was talking to us, and what he said was happening was they are storing them in warehouses.
Yeah.
So like many of the bikes that they normally would be importing, and maybe some of the parts and everything else, I don't really know. They are just, it's cheaper to warehouse them, even in the United States. Like if you can get them onto, not take them through customs, just get them off the ship and into a warehouse, which you can do, is my understanding.
Seems to be. In some cases, there's limited capacity. It's not like everybody in the world could do that at the drop of a hat.
But he's like, it's cheaper. It's just so much cheaper just to store them in a warehouse, especially in China, where it's really cheap.
Right.
But even here in the United States, it's cheaper to do that than it is to pay, 200+%
whatever
tariff
it was.
on
Yeah.
them. So whatever it was, and
so
we'll see. So if that's what's happening.
All
with
of
Sofabaton, I would not be surprised.
Recent month history. I am still holding out hope. I do actually have a high level of confidence that the Sofabaton X2 will arrive at some point. I am disappointed that it's not June, which was the last month that I heard from them personally. I'm disappointed that it is now being pushed back till at least August. If it doesn't come out until Christmas time, I wouldn't be shocked. That wouldn't shock me. But I do have a high level of confidence still that the X2 will eventually release, because Sofabaton has not been the sort of company to announce a product and then just literally not have it available. Their former remotes have all come out. This one is just facing a delay.
Yeah. So Infinite Gary wanted to let Henry know that he also has a Panasonic UB9000. He doesn't think its longevity is anything to worry about. Gary still has a Marantz BD8002 and a Denon A1, both of those being Blu-ray players from 16 years ago. And he still spins discs in both of them with no problem. So hopefully, I mean, you can get anything can fail for whatever reason.
Sure.
So, you know,
and it was a different time as far as optical disk drive manufacturing went 16, 20 years ago. Like I was mentioning, where I'm pretty sure we're down to a single OEM still making optical drives these days. So yeah, that who knows? But yes, I wouldn't let that sway me away from a UB9000.
Gurinder says, since we've mentioned Panasonic's Ultra HD Blu-ray players a few times in our recent episodes, I got him to have a look around the internet for any new discussions or updates on the forums regarding his UB420 model. He found a thread where they are sharing modified firmware that you can download and manually load onto your player from a USB stick. It seems to have started off with the goal of removing region locks on discs, but it has expanded quite a bit since then. One thing it can do now is add the option to target 350 nit tone mapping in Panasonic's HDR optimizer, which is a lower nit level than is available by default and was only available on the flagship UB9000 model. Another thing it can do is remove the YouTube and Netflix apps that are built into the player by default. They always load during the boot up of the player, and given the very limited processor resources, that slows down the user interface. So since he never uses those apps anyways, and God help anybody that does, he's keen on giving it a try to make the boot up faster and smoother. Wish him luck. Yeah, dude. I do, because I don't want you to brick your player.
Yep.
But because that's what I'm always worried about whenever it says, "Oh, you can sideload it." Ugh,
yeah, this is definitely not authorized firmware from Panasonic. Yeah. This absolutely has been hacked by people. But I mean, it's not like it's the most complicated type of code in the world. There are people who definitely are up to the task of doing this sort of thing. So yes, I wish you luck. At least the UB420 is not such an expensive player that if it does end up a brick, replacing it is not the end of the world as far as cost goes. You don't wish to do it, but it's not too terrible.
Dan has music playing in his backyard fairly often. So on our that is hard to say. So on our advice, he installed a pair of 8-inch Yamaha outdoor speakers. He connected them to a 2-channel amp and hooked up an old Apple AirPort Express for AirPlay support, and he loves it. It works well. Mm-hmm. But once a year, he has a gathering that takes place in his front yard. There's usually a bouncy castle involved and a fan to keep that inflated. Is pretty darn loud. Mm-hmm. He tried bringing his pair of Sonos One speakers onto the front porch or by his garage out front, but they simply could not be heard over the bounce house fan noise. So he's considering getting another pair of 8-inch Yamaha outdoor speakers. But given that this is honestly a once-a-year thing, that's more money and hassle, installation and wires and all that stuff that he wants to get into. Mm-hmm. He's considering getting a bigger Sonos speaker, maybe an Era 300, but that's kind of pricey too. He was looking at the options from Wiim, W-I-I-M, but he's thinking that his ideal solution would just be a portable speaker that can get loud enough and is also something he could take camping. Well, that limited every idea I had in my head.
Okay.
It would get more usage and be a better value to him that way. So any suggestions? I do, but I'll let Rob talk first because I got to find the link on AV Gadgets.
Okay, so I headed over to the Wirecutter and over to Artings because they've reviewed lots of Bluetooth speakers. So I mean, that thing he brought up about wanting to be able to take it camping, I'm like, okay, so that means a couple of things. It needs to be battery powered, preferably with a decent battery life to it. And it can't be gigantic. I don't imagine you're wanting to bring anything gigantic with you camping. This has to be, quite portable if that's the idea. Because, I mean, there are the really quite popular now party speakers, right? The big, PA size looking speakers that have a handle and little wheels. You can roll them along like a suitcase that you wheel, and many of them have like RGB lighting because they want to bring the party. And those can get super duper loud. Don't necessarily have to cost an arm and a leg. There's oodles and oodles of companies that are making those types of party speakers, and many of them have long-lasting batteries that are built into them. But I'm not sure that's what I want to bring camping because, I mean, they're not as heavy as you might imagine from the size of them because they're really quite hollow and made out of plastic, but they are big and, something that you're wheeling around. So just looking at the very much more, this is easy to carry battery-powered ones, JBL They have a model that they just call the Boombox at this point. Comes really quite highly rated on both Wirecutter and Artings. It does cost about $50 less than a Sonos Era 300, but it can get substantially louder than that Sonos model. Plus, the Sonos speaker does not have a battery built into it. Not the Era 300 anyway. Sonos does have portable speakers with batteries built into them, but they cost even more and don't play as loud. So JBL has a Boombox. They also have a model just called the Extreme, which is, I think, over $400. But yeah, those are their sort of like boombox style. Just think back to a boombox is that type of sort of size and shape and weight. But that is something that you could conceivably take camping, and it plays considerably louder than your average Bluetooth speaker, but has a battery that lasts on the order of 18 to 24 hours. Pretty good battery life in those ones. There is also the Ultimate Ears Hyper Boom. That's their biggest of their Boom series Bluetooth speakers from Ultimate Ears. It is just a fairly sizable rectangle. There's nothing particularly, like, this doesn't look like a super portable speaker, but it's not any bigger than the JBL Boombox, but doesn't have like a nice handle to carry it around. So I kind of lean towards that JBL Boombox, if I'm being honest, for all the things that you talked about. I think it fits the sort of budget and has the features and the size that you might be looking for.
Mm. So I reviewed the Eco X Gear, whatever, Eco Journey. I don't remember what the name of the stupid company is. They have a waterproof, I called it a speaker case, because it's a case that has a speaker in it. Okay. You could open it up and put things inside. It's completely weatherproof. Like, it's all of the things. It's not huge as far as the size of it, and the internal volume is not nearly as big as you think it's going to be. Because of the the amount of space that the lid takes up. It's really for like going to the beach or something like that and throwing like your keys and your phone in there, and that's pretty much it. It's like a 50-hour battery life, and the thing about this thing is that it sounds bad on the low volume side. So I was listening to it like inside, and it was like I could inside my old house, which had a fairly open floor plan. I couldn't get it up to half volume before it was like, this is just too loud. It's too loud in the entire house. Everything sucks. But when I took it outside and stood like 20 feet away from it and turned the volume up, it sounded much better. Like, it was uneven inside. Like, this is not something you would play inside your house. This is something that is really meant to be outside. So, and it gets insanely loud. Is this... This is the only speaker that I have personal experience with that I would say, this is the speaker you take with you camping. This is the speaker that you only use when you're outside. Most of the speakers I would recommend to you, like, Soundcore has a ton of different speakers that are both indoor and outdoor that you can do stuff with that would be good. But they mostly sound really good at like normal volumes. And outside, when you're blasting them, they're like, okay, they're good, but they're the Boom 2 or whatever they have is good, but it's it's not getting as loud because basically they don't design it to be blasted in an outdoor environment. This thing really only sounds good outside at like high volumes. So it's not the best looking speaker I've ever seen. It's not something I really was super excited about recommending. But it does have very specific uses that I think fits what you want.
Sounds
I want to take this camping. I mean, this is the one that you're like, oh, I ran over it with my car.
It seems like that's pretty much precisely what it was built for, is like tailgating, camping, that sort of thing.
So it's worth taking a look at, and my experience with it sounds like lines up with what you're actually looking to do with it, because if you're just trying to get louder than the fans on a bouncy,
which is a challenge. Those are pretty noisy fans. So there's the Eco X Gear Eco Journey. Have a look at that one.
Sasi. First up, we request that Sasi keep us updated regarding the ceiling replacement at the Hindu temple that his parents attend. He's happy to report they ended up following our advice. They went with regular office-style acoustic ceiling tiles, not overly expensive like the one the contractor was trying to push on them. but they look perfectly nice, especially compared to the old ceiling that was in desperate need of replacement. And above the ceiling tiles, they put rolls of R19 insulation, but as we suggested, they didn't need to cover every square inch up there. They put one roll of insulation over every 3 rows of ceiling tiles, and that really helped keep the cost down, but it seems to have done the trick. It's not so echoey in there anymore, which was the big problem.
Hooray!
Before. Yes. The cost to replace the very large red curtain on the left side of the room was just too high, though. There really wasn't a soundproof solution that would work for them, as the entire curtain still needed to be easily retractable. So they weren't quite able to get everything they were hoping for, but at least the ceiling is done now, and that was a success. Now, to his first question, which is something he's been meaning to ask for a little while. Sasi has heard the Paradigm Founder Series speakers in person in more than one setup. He's never had any particular problem with them, but he's never loved them either. Mm-hmm. Given their price point, he's personally been more impressed with their Premier Series that costs less, but outright sound a bit better in his opinion.
Okay.
Well, Aaron's Audio Corner posted Aaron's review and clipple measurements of the large 990C center model. It uses the Founder Series coaxial driver for the mid-range and tweeter, and Aaron's measurements indicate some issues right in the crossover region. Now, Sasi knows that some Paradigm Founder Series owners who love their speakers and doesn't think Aaron's or anybody's review should change that one bit. But he has raised some, let's say, concerns. Not for him personally, though, because he was never in love with them to begin with. What he wanted to ask us about, though, is that a few years ago now, one of the only people he ever heard say that he didn't think the Paradigm Founder Series were all that great was Rob. Rob said he tended to like Paradigm speakers quite a bit overall, but he pointed out that the new coaxial driver, the first time Paradigm has ever used that sort of design, didn't quite seem up to snuff. So Sasi just wanted to know, how did Rob come to that conclusion? Was it purely from an in-person audition? Was it based on measurements? Did someone Rob trusts post a review as well before Aaron's that indicated the same sort of issues? Because most of the reviews out there seem to be pretty glowing. So how was Rob ahead of the curve in saying the Paradigm Founder Series might actually have some room for improvement? Go ahead, Rob. I have got to use the bathroom.
Okay, yeah. So it is a combination. There is I don't know if it was an outright review. There were measurements taken, so I think it was a full review and not just a preview that they sometimes post, but over at Audioholics. Audioholics was one of the first to post a review with measurements of the Paradigm Founder Series, and the measurements that they posted there just indicated exactly what we're seeing here, that there is some interference that's happening right in the crossover between the tweeter and the mid-range driver, and this is a tweeter that is embedded right in the middle of that mid-range driver, a coaxial speaker design, which can be a challenge. There's also an additional challenge that not everyone is always thinking about, which is that there are quite a few patents that are held by other companies, like KEF in particular, as you might imagine, with their concentric what do they call that thing? UniQ, right? The UniQ driver design that they have over there. And then ELAC as well. They're going to hold some design patents at this point. So there isn't necessarily the complete engineering and design freedom unless they want to pay royalty fees to the companies that hold patents on other things. If you're trying to work your way around that and design and make your own coaxial or concentric drivers, sometimes there's limitations there in what you have to do to work around patents that are held by other companies. So the measurements were there on Audioholics early on, to indicate that, okay, there's something that doesn't look like a completely smooth response, especially as you move off axis with that Paradigm Founder Series coaxial driver. But then, yes, Paradigm is easy to audition pretty much anywhere in Canada, at least any major city in Canada. If you do have any audio shops that are around, Paradigm is going to be one of the brands that's carried in Canada. So yes, when those Founder Series were relatively new, one of the audio shops in the lower mainland of British Columbia had them set up in their listening room. So I did my standard thing that I do with any speaker that I'm checking out for the first time. I put on some pink noise, just playing some steady pink noise, or the like trim level test tone that you would use in any AV receiver or pre-pro. When you're just setting the trim levels, you put on that pink noise. Limited bandwidth pink noise sound that they play. But what I do, I get up close to the speaker, And so my face is like right in front of the tweeter is normally where I start. And then, I'm like a foot away, basically. And then I just move myself, to the left, right, up, and down to just get a sense of, okay, as I change my axis, whether I'm off axis or, simulating like towing it in or that sort of thing, how does that pink noise change? And one of the things that I'm personally looking for, and it definitely sounds like Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner has a similar approach. It's all based on Harman's research and Dr. Floyd Toole's research. I do prefer a wide, even dispersion. So I'm looking for that pink noise to not shift terribly in tone as I go from on axis to off axis. All speakers do shift in tone, but some of them, as I've talked about before, there's kind of like almost like a line where you're like, okay, on this side of the line towards the tweeter, the sound is pretty even then, and there's like this line that I hit, and I go to the other side, and the timbre, the tone of that pink noise changes quite noticeably. And some of them, it's a very gradual change, or some of them, like the Paradigm Founder series, in my experience, it was wobbly. It was like, okay, as I'm moving left and right up close to the speaker, it's like that pink noise tone and timbre was just wobbly sounding. It was changing. It was not an even gradual roll off or a even line in the sand, different sound on the other side of the line. It was just like up and down, back and forth, and I'm like, ooh, that's not what I'm personally looking for. So that's where my comment came from. It was that personal experience plus the measurements that Audioholics showed early on that I'm like, I don't see any disagreement between my personal experience and what those measurements showed, and Aaron's Audio Corner shows the same thing now.
You just put your head real close, right?
Yep.
I missed the beginning of that. Yep. That's what I figured you did, because that's what you always do.
That's
it's
what
not
I
like
always
it's
do.
a big miss. It's like, how did you figure this out, Rob? I don't know. He does the thing he always does. He puts his head real close and plays sweeps. I mean, how hard is that? Anyways, I do want to mention a little something about that too, because all these measurements and stuff are quite important in showing objectively that you can, the performance of a speaker, off axis, on axis, all the other stuff that we always talk about on this podcast. Mm-hmm. But the idea that you have to do measurements in order for your reviews or whatever to be, to have some validity is also not true. Most of the things that we can measure, you can hear, but you have to do silly stuff, or you have to be you have to have some way of comparing speaker to speaker that is very uniform. And what Rob does is very uniform. Can you notice the difference between that speaker and other speakers, or how its off-axis performance, or what Rob was hearing is true by doing something else? Yeah, you probably can. Mm-hmm. But you would have to actually do it. And most reviewers don't. Well, most of the reviews you see online is not that. It's just they set them up, they listen to them, and they go, they sound good, because most speakers sound pretty good.
Well, and the flip side of it is, if I am just setting it up and I'm sitting stationary in my middle seat, mm-hmm. and I'm not exactly head in a vice, but I'm not moving around either, then if I'm getting like predominantly an on-axis sound, or just a consistent axis sound, where I'm not changing my angle to these speakers on a continuous rolling basis, if I'm just kind of sitting still in my normal seat and having these speakers pointed at me, I'm not necessarily going to pick that up. The people who love them and are just like one seat in their listening room, they've got these Founder Series speakers pointed right at them, like I love them, they sound great to me. I'm like, that's not a shock to me, because you're not sitting across a wide couch and then moving yourself back and forth across that couch as you're listening to something. That would be an unusual thing to do. But by the same token, if Audioholics' measurements, if Aaron's measurements had shown nothing, if they had shown like a really smooth, wide, even off-axis response, I would have been like, what the heck was I hearing? But in this case, the measurements line up with my experience. I'm like, okay, so to me, not shocking. That's what I heard. It shows up in the measurements as well. And, simple as that.
And and this is why we also talk about rooms too, because if the measurements had come out and it said there's nothing, these things are very even, then Rob would have been like, there's something with my room. I need to figure this out, because this is a problem, or with the room that he was listening to them in, or whatever. Yeah. So, that's how you address these things. And I remember I reviewed some speakers a long time ago, and I noted, and they got real mad about this, I noted that, if you were the speaker's performance was very height related.
Right.
Like the tweeter was a little bit low on these speakers.
Yeah.
So I was sitting on my couch going, man, these things are like crap. And then I don't think I said that exact word in the review. It probably said something a little bit nicer. And I was like, but if I sat on the floor with the speakers being more towards, the tweeters being more towards my ear level, they sounded much better. And they were like, well, that's just silly. You should, well, I'm like, you should make stands for your speakers then, because these are stupid. All right, now that Dirac Art is definitely coming to Denon Marantz receivers, how concerned should we all be about potentially trying to power 11, 9, 13, 15? I don't know why I put 11 first there, because these are all in order. But I put 11 first.
It still worked out.
I guess I didn't want to say 9, 11. That's what it was. See?
Fair enough. Yep.
Some sort of trauma response. But playing them all low enough to actually make Dirac Art optimal and worthwhile. Like, the ideal is to actually have full range speakers. When he says playing low enough, low down the frequency
in
range,
frequency response,
soft enough. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So the ideal is to actually have full range speakers in every position when using Dirac Art, right? But it was always sort of the assumption that if you were powering a whole bunch of speakers with just the built-in amplification, then at least they'd all be set to small, so that you'd be offloading some of the amplification burden that way. The Denon A1H, for example, sure, it's got massive power supply, but it's honestly up to the task of powering 15 speakers with its built-in amplifiers if you're using Dirac Art. Could this maybe change our stance on when it's appropriate to add external amplification to an AV receiver setup? It's been a while since I've even thought about Dirac Art, because I still think I'm still unsure as to how well it's going to work or whatever. I'm sure it's going to do something. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still a little unclear in my mind how this whole thing works. But to me, this idea that you have full range speakers at every single location within your system isn't what most people think of as full range speakers. Okay. What they even may say may be full range, but I don't think you need to have a speaker that plays down to 20 hertz at every single location in order to make this work. The lowest of the low bass, it's not directional anyway, so what does it matter that it's coming from other places? I understand what the idea is and how Dirac Art is supposed to work, but I think that's more of in a very large room where bass is more directional. Does this make sense?
I mean, they are attempting. So on a theoretical level with Dirac Art, the idea is that, okay, you have multiple sound producing things, however low all of those sound producing things can play, right. We're going to utilize them. It's almost a bit like active noise canceling. That's not a perfect analogy, but it's along those lines of, I've got a sound that's being produced over here. It is interacting with the walls and ceiling and floor of the room to create whatever standing wave pattern or just repeatable wave pattern is happening at the seats. But I've got this other sound producing thing at a different location. So if I coordinate the two of them, it's not that the original source sound is changing. That's still from the original speaker, the original channel or object location in the sound mix. But I'm going to use this other sound producing thing at a different location in the room to counteract an unwanted wave pattern that shows up in the seats. So yes, the theoretical ideal is that every sound producing thing in your room would be completely full range, because then you could apply that sort of processing over the entire frequency range. Now, Dirac, in their own explanation of Art now, is saying, okay, look, Dirac Art is actually only applied up to 150 hertz. They're not trying to do some kind of room treatment above that, which means you still want, for specific reflections or for speaker boundary interference response from your front speakers being physically close to your front walls, you still want like 4 or 6 inch thick acoustic panels, because those are going to be effective down to 250, down to 125 hertz, respectively. You still want those, but you don't necessarily need the really thick bass traps, the 8 inch or thicker bass traps, to treat all the way down to below 80 hertz into the crossover region. Like, the crossover region is almost what they're focusing on most with Art. They're like, we can really, really effectively treat the crossover region now without passive room treatments, because even if your speakers are set to small, as long as you've got that crossover frequency set at something like 80 hertz, we can now treat the crossover region. So they're still like, okay, still have multiple subwoofers and use Dirac Live bass control for the below 80 hertz stuff. We're not getting rid of that. We're still doing that. And then we're still using Dirac Live room correction, the original program, for everything above 150 hertz to treat the speakers. But now it's that sometimes problematic region between the, what traditionally we would consider the top end of the subwoofers and the low end of the speakers, where passive room treatments were kind of the only way you could ever address that, but they had to be thick. They had to be thicker than most people imagine or are comfortable with. A lot of people looking for 2-inch thick panels, and those weren't going to come anywhere close to addressing that 65 to 150 hertz range of frequencies. And they're like, okay, we can do that with the speakers that are already here. So this doesn't demand that all of your speakers play below 80 hertz. If what you're doing is like, I've got multiple subwoofers to address the 20 to 80 hertz region. I've got 4 or 6 inch thick panels to address the above 150 hertz, to address that region in between. Now I can use Dirac Live Art. That's really the way they're promoting it now, and I'm on board with that. But to the question originally, first of all, I wouldn't personally power 15 speakers with my Denon A1H.
No.
Because there is a point, like all AV receivers, where the noise floor does start to rise. You just start to connect more and more speakers, and the passive noise floor idling, sitting there, playing nothing, it does start to rise. On my old Onkyo receiver, 11-channel Onkyo receiver that I had, probably the lowest noise floor I've ever heard from, I would say, any amplifier bar none. It was a remarkably low noise floor that I had out of that Onkyo. It was it was a flagship unit, and it was a wonderful amplifier with a wonderfully low noise floor. But if I connected 9 or 11 speakers to it, that noise floor just instantly started going up, audibly so. Whereas 5 or 7, it was great. So even that one, I was like, okay, 5 or 7, I'm very comfortable powering off the AV receiver itself. If I want to maintain that ultra low noise floor, I was adding an amplifier for the 9th and 11th. Same with the Denon A1H. I'm like, yeah, I will power 9 speakers with that one. There doesn't seem to be any problem doing 9, 7, definitely no problem at all. But 15, I probably wouldn't do that anyway. And now if I'm doing Dirac Live Art, I'm definitely going to want to add external amplification to it. Not for all channels, not for all 15. That's not necessary. But yeah, beyond 9, I'm probably going to do it anyway. And that's before art and definitely after art.
Yeah. So this idea that we now have to all have full range speakers at every single location, I think is... I don't think that was ever really the goal for anybody.
It was just the early explanations of how it could theoretically work.
Yeah. So we were always going to have a couple of subwoofers or more, and then just speakers that can play down to 80 hertz, like we always recommend. So I am, and like Rob said, at some point when you're these AV receivers, just the noise floor is what you got to worry about, and that happens with a lot of different products, so even amplifiers sometimes. So you need to be a little careful with that anyways. Miguel is trying to better understand speaker measurements and what exactly flat frequency response actually means. It's almost like I wrote an article about this. I'll have to go ahead and find that for you. One thing we need to be aware of is that Miguel is blind, so he cannot look at graphs and understand measurements in that way. He is going by written or spoken descriptions and listening to the sweeps themselves. He has RBH signature reference speakers with their AMT folded ribbon tweeters. By all accounts, they measure flat, but he wants more context and clarity about precisely what that means. For example, he has read many references to speakers' frequency response being plus or minus 3 decibels, but then he has also read things like about things like 1/3 octave smoothing, or only focusing on a portion of the total frequency range, like say 80 hertz up to 10 kilohertz, rather than the entire 20 to 20 hertz, 20 kilohertz. So if someone is saying that a speaker measures flat and that is a good thing, what exactly does that mean? And at what point would we declare that a speaker is not flat? Would it be as soon as it is more than plus or minus 3 dB? Would that only be within a certain frequency range? He just really wants to understand it clearly, but without the ability to look at the graph, point at something and say, there, it is flat. So You've asked a lot of good questions.
It is
and
good questions,
the reality
yes.
is that you don't really need to see the graph to know that something is flat. So this is fine. To describe flatness, if you will, and I will still link up the article, even though I guess you'll have to use a reader to go through it. What flatness for a speaker is same volume at multiple frequencies. So if you put a sweep in that's supposed to be 85 dB or whatever, a volume, pick a volume, doesn't make any difference what it is, any volume, and then the whole sweep is supposed to be that volume. You play it through the speaker, and the whole sweep is that same volume. It doesn't change. Then it is a flat speaker. Now, most speakers can't play the entire frequency range, just like we were talking about before, meaning it can't play 20 hertz up to 20 kilohertz. So the speaker itself will have, within its specifications, we can play flat, or the volume when you play a sweep through it does not change by more than 3 dB plus or minus what it's supposed to be. I just hit my microphone, sorry, because I'm talking with my hands right now. It does not change within plus or minus 3 dB, so a 6 dB swing total from this frequency to this frequency. So a lot of them will say 15 kilohertz or 17 kilohertz or 20 or 30 kilohertz, something stupid like that, all the way down to 60 or 80 or 100 or something like that, 100 hertz. And that just tells you where they say that in an anechoic environment, meaning in a room where the room does not affect the sound, or outside in the middle of a field someplace, in theory, that speaker from a certain distance with a certain amount of power will stay at that same volume the entire time. A lot of times it's 1 watt, 1 meter. It can play, from whatever frequency to whatever frequency without deviating more than a total of 6 dB or plus or minus 3 dB throughout that frequency range. And that's what that playing flat means. It's not the whole of it, because as we just talked about with the Paradigm speakers, being able to play that flat during that entire frequency range is one thing, but being able to play it at a wide angle, or what's the dispersion, also makes a difference. So you can't just take one measurement, which they will do. You're like, this is the best place on this speaker to measure so that we can get plus or minus 3 dB, from the widest frequency range so that we can put this. I've had speaker manufacturers tell me, when I question them about their speakers, like, how did you get this measurement? There's no way the speaker plays this low. Oh, we put it in a corner.
Sure.
It's very unethical, and I've only ever had one speaker manufacturer do that, and they are no longer in business for a very good reason. So, but most speakers, especially when you're dealing with somebody like Paradigm or any Canadian-based, they're always using the National Research Labs or whatever it is up there to do their anechoic measurements, because they have basic free access to it, or very cheap access. I don't know how it works now. So that's sort of the gist of it. And yes, the only thing you have to worry about when you're at home and you're playing your own sweeps and you're listening to your own speakers is, like we said earlier, like I said earlier, you have to worry about whether or not the room is making a difference here.
It's fair enough to say you do worry about the speaker initially, because what the speaker is natively outputting into that room does matter, and then the room also affects it after that point. So yes, it is fair enough to be concerned about when I can't look at a measurement graph of what my speaker outputs, and I can't see that, but someone has written, this measures flat, or it doesn't measure flat, whatever it is. It's like, yes, trying to fully understand what that genuinely means. So just to expand a little bit on what Tom said there, the simplest way I know how to describe it is, just think of whatever recording you're playing, whether that's a movie soundtrack or a TV show or a work of music, whatever it is. Just think of that recording as a set of instructions. Okay, it's an audio signal that is saying, play these notes at this time for this long and play them this loud. And the simplest thing that a speaker could do is just accurately follow those instructions. And that in the simplest terms, would be a flat speaker. It's a speaker that follows the instructions exactly. It plays exactly the right notes at exactly the right time for exactly the right duration at exactly the volume level that the signal said to play them. And if a speaker does exactly that and you measure it in an anechoic chamber, then if you could see the graph of what the original signal was, then what you measure coming out of that speaker will look exactly like with the signal that went in. So signal in equals signal out. That is, by definition, a flat speaker. Now, there's more to it, because if you are just listening to that speaker in a room and not outdoors or in an anechoic chamber, then yeah, what you ultimately hear reaching your ears is not exactly the same as what just was emitted by the speaker. But we talk about this tolerance range because our human hearing is not as precise as a measurement microphone. Our brain compensates for a ton of stuff. And so if what we're saying is, well, the only acceptable speaker is one that superimposes its output on the original incoming signal, it's like, that's just physically not really possible to do. I mean, companies are chasing that. They will continue to chase that. They will try and get ever closer and closer to that criteria. But in real life, there's going to be some wiggle room. There's going to be some tolerance. So that's where the plus or minus 3 dB. And you might see some companies are like, oh, our speakers stay within plus or minus 1.5 dB or plus or minus 2 dB. They might specify that their tolerance is tighter. And then, just like Tom described, it's like very few speakers can play all the way down to 20 hertz. And we don't personally worry about that because we would rather have separate subwoofers.
Right.
That handle those low frequencies. So we're like, okay, it's perfectly fine to us that a speaker remains very accurate to the original signal within a plus or minus 2 dB, 3 dB type of window, because our brains are really good at compensating within that level of tolerance from the highest frequency.
Getting to his next question. That's getting into his next
It is,
question.
yeah. So from the highest frequency down to at least a range where it can cross over into a subwoofer. And as long as it does that, we're like, okay, that speaker is telling it like it is. It's not making some sounds considerably louder or quieter than others outside of what the signal asked it to do. It's like, what came in is what I'm putting out, and that is a flat speaker.
So he asks, how audible is it when a speaker is not flat? How bad does it have to be before it's not flat enough? One thing that really confuses him is that we have often said that Ascend acoustic speakers measure very flat, and we like them for that. But Audio Science Review did not like a few of Ascend's speakers, and they described problems in the measurements that led them to those conclusions. So could we describe in detail for him what is happening in those measurements? Are we ignoring certain things that show up in the graph but aren't actually audible? Because we would definitely want to know more about that, if there are things that should be ignored in measurements. So the reason why plus or minus, like Rob just said, the reason why plus or minus 3 dB is sort of the go-to measurement is because within that range, it's not that noticeable that something is a little bit louder or a little bit softer than what it's supposed to be. It's just a 3 dB is just like, it's a little bit quieter or it's a little bit louder than it should be, but not so much that you're like, what the heck is going on there? And in fact, as you get down into the bass, we're even less sensitive to those sorts of things. It can be maybe 6 dB louder or 6 dB softer.
The tolerance window grows larger as you get lower and lower in frequency.
So, is there the reason why plus or minus 3 dB is sort of the standard is because that's where we've all kind of decided that that's good enough. Like if it's within plus or minus 3 dB, it's like a confidence interval if you're into statistics. You're like, that's basically the same thing.
It's like it's a combination of like, realistically speaking, what can we manufacture at what cost? And so it's kind of like, okay, the tolerance is like, yes, the ideal would be the plus or minus window is like 0.1 of a dB. Okay, that's great. But to manufacture that, it's like the cost would be so insanely high, or it's be so incredibly difficult. The yields on the parts you're manufacturing are so small that we're like, okay, so how big can that tolerance window get before it's not a problem? And we've sort of settled industry-wide on this plus or minus 3 dB. But I mean, there are reviewers like Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner who are very confident in his ability to hear a 3 decibel difference. And he's like, okay, so this isn't like this is a bad speaker and this is a great speaker. But he's like, there are these subtle differences, and people who really care about, talking about subtle differences in audio, he'll point to a measurement. He's like, well, in the 2 to 5 kilohertz region, this speaker is like genuinely 6 decibels louder than this other one, because one was at the top of that plus 3 dB, tolerance, and the other one at that same small range of frequencies was at the minus 3 dB. And I'm like, if someone heard a 6 decibel difference between two speakers compared head to head, I'm not really going to question that. That should be audible. But we're all going to say it's audible, but not so bad that it falls into the range of, well, one of them is good and one of them is bad. Now, if some speaker had a full-on 6 decibel dip, like it's plus or minus 6 dB, right in the vocal region, and therefore it could be 12 decibels quieter than some other speaker, it's like, that is going to be, well, one of these sounds realistic and the other one doesn't, or one of these sounds like everyone's voice is harsh and the other one sounds like everyone's voice is like recessed, and it is a very noticeable difference. So like plus or minus 6 dB is the point where I say, oh, that is into the realm of one of these is good and one of these is bad if it's swinging that much. So that, I think that kind of directly answers that question on that front. But yes, as we've mentioned, there is like dispersion as well. What is happening when you're directly in front of the speaker versus off angle to the speaker? And all of Dr. Floyd Toole's research is like, well, the closer we can get to the response off axis being the same as on axis, we don't expect them to be literally identical and superimposed. We definitely expect the high frequencies to start getting quieter and quieter as we move off axis. But the closer that on and off axis can be, the more gradual that shift is, the better we tend to like those speakers, regardless of what room they're put into and across a wider seating area. So if we're talking home theater, this is a desirable thing. Was there anything else? So the Ascend Acoustics in particular. Yeah. So first of all, there are some Ascend speaker models that got recommendations and pretty high praise from Audio Science Review, and some that they were quite critical of. And those speakers that they were very critical of primarily were the Luna series of speakers when they came out, the Luna Duo and the original Luna with their slot front ports. And they were showing some pretty funky measurements in there. And David Fabricant, who is the owner and designer over at Ascend Acoustics, at first he was like, he wasn't using a Klippel measurement system. He was using an older measurement system that he's very experienced with and knows how to read it. And he's like, I wasn't getting those anomaly measurements. But he took it upon himself to purchase a Klippel system. This is over $100,000 measurement system. And he was like, you know what? I was able to reproduce the results that Audio Science Review showed in those particular speakers that they did not recommend and were critical of. And he redesigned them. That's why we have version 2s of those speakers now, and has smoothed them out. And honestly, what they were pointing out was there were a couple of specific frequencies, quite narrow band frequencies. So like a range from, say, 125 hertz to 145 hertz. Okay, so like a narrow region, but still there, where the port on the original design was literally resonating. It was like, okay, at that little narrow range of frequencies, that port is like going, and it showed this big old spike, this narrow spike, but this spike in there. And so that goes back to something you asked in your first question, which is smoothing. This is something that really only applies to visual graphs. Okay, because the original measurement is going to show like every tiny fluctuation that could possibly be there. But visually, that just looks like noise. We just look at that and go, there's just squiggles all over this graph.
Right.
And we also don't hear that way. Our brain does not hear like every possible tiny individual. There has to be a gap between notes for us to detect them as a change in frequency. So we apply smoothing to the graphs to, in one way, more accurately depict the way we hear, but also to just make it visually something we can actually look at and go, okay, it's not just noise that I'm looking at anymore on this graph. And typically we say like 1/12 octave. So like every 12th of an octave, that's where we're taking our reading, and we're averaging out the reading across that. Or even 1/6 smoothing octave is like kind of closer to that. So that is the reason why you can have substantial differences in the appearance of a graph. It's like one of them is more smooth than another, but the smooth graph sometimes better represents how we hear in real life. So Dave was always pointing out, it's like, first of all, those resonances are only going to appear if you're like playing that specific note. So that, if many musical passages are never going to play that note, you'll never notice it. And then it also depended on how loud is that note being played. Because if it's a fairly quiet sound, then that resonance, you're not going to hear it. But if it's a really loud, and they're stressing these speakers when they're testing them at Audio Science Review, it's like, okay, we can pick that up. And so if we don't smooth it out, if we're using a clippable system that doesn't smooth things out, we pick up that resonance. And he's like, well, you know what? I can fix that. And he did. And Audio Science Review praised him for that, because they're like, that's exactly what we were hoping for. We put out our measurements, the manufacturers look at them and go, well, that doesn't seem right. But instead of just being defensive about it, he's like, can I replicate it? Can I use the scientific method and replicate what they found? I can, and I can fix it. So let's go ahead and fix it.
So if you had owned these speakers and were playing them normally, what would probably happen is that every once in a while you would notice a weird sound. And it wouldn't happen very often, and maybe not even watching the same content. And because it would be very dependent upon a bunch of different things that would have to happen all at the same time in order for you to hear this thing. And you would just be like, well, that was weird, and never think of it again. You got to remember how many people have extremely bad speakers. And we're not talking about, they're not very flat. We're talking extremely inaccurate speakers who think that that's just the way things sound.
Sure.
That's just how that sounds. No, it's not. That's not how it sounds. It's not supposed to sound that way. Or there's supposed to be sound there and there's not. That sort of thing. So, a lot of this gets into, people get very focused and fixated on these measurements and saying, oh, there's a slight inaccuracy right here, or there's a little bit of a resonance right here, and it's now these speakers are now bad. For the vast majority of what you would experience these speakers for, they would not be bad. I mean, that's why we keep saying on this podcast, once you do a little bit of research and you're in the range of good speakers, they're all pretty good. Yes, some are technically better, but for 99% of your experience with them, they're going to all sound, if not identical, they're going to sound fairly similar. And then every once in a while, one speaker is going to do something weird, and you're going to throw it, just kind of blow it off or not even really notice it.
A fleeting
because
moment.
The volume was too low. What's that?
A fleeting moment. Yeah.
Yes. That the volume was too low and you didn't hear it in your room, or maybe your room is already doing things to the sound to make it sound better or worse anyway, so it covers all that up. There's a lot of things that can happen. So this idea of chasing perfection when it comes to speakers or getting the absolute best speaker for your money, at some point you're paying simply to have a graph that looks better, that no one looks at but you. And your speakers don't sound any better than the guy who spent, a fraction of the time doing the research that you did. Because in your room is making so much of a difference. It doesn't make it covers up all of these small inaccuracies that we're referring to. Infinite Gary. There were a couple of display industry trade shows this past month that focus on the business-to-business side of things, as well as demonstrating the latest prototypes of forthcoming displays. The electroluminescent quantum dot QDEL prototypes have been shown at these sorts of trade shows for a few years now, but this year it appears they are nearly ready for full commercialization and integration into consumer-ready products. As with most brand new display technologies, QDEL panels will first appear in smaller screen sizes targeted at phones, tablets, and laptops, but the expectation seems to fully extend to flat panel displays soon, probably. Anyways, QDEL panels are touted as being inorganic, so they are not susceptible to burn-in, more efficient, since they do not require any color filters and can be manufactured using fewer layers, and able to produce pure colors, since quantum dots produce extremely narrow bandwidth red, green, and now blue primaries. But for now, the current prototype panels are not as bright as mini LEDs or even OLEDs. So it's fairly easy to predict that QDEL will continue to improve, and perhaps the first QDEL TVs will hit the market within I don't know, 5 years or something. But it's not as though all of the existing display technologies are just going to stand still and cease improving themselves. So is QDEL something to genuinely get excited about? Are they actually going to be a visible improvement in an out-and-out picture quality over current TV technologies? And by the time QDEL TVs come to market, will it maybe end up being behind existing display technologies in sheer picture quality and not actually be an improvement in any way at all? We, of course, can't know this, and Gary loves to ask us questions we have no idea and no ability
He likes to speculate. That's fine.
Yes, there is speculation here. So how many times have we gotten excited about a new TV technologies just to have it stall in not just production but in development to the point where by the time it comes out it's already obsolete? I mean, it's happened hundreds if not thousands of times across my lifetime, and in more industries than I can probably ever mention or think about. This happens all the time. Somebody comes out with a really good technology or solution, and then, it just doesn't materialize fast enough to be for the consumers to care about it. Not only that, there has to be. I don't want to say this the way I'm about to say it, but I'm going to say it because I believe it to be true. There has to be within the marketing of it something that grabs the attention of the consumer, whether it be true or not, that gets people excited about it. And we can't always predict what that's going to be. Neither can the marketers. So, LCDs came out and they started touting they started touting a lot of things, but one of the things they really harped on was the refresh rate. 60 hertz, 120 hertz, 240 hertz. And the plasma displays people were like, but ours is so much faster. Ours is 644 hertz, I guess. We never really thought about it because it's not something we think about, because that's not something we have to improve upon because it's already as good as it ever needs to be. And yet, people got really excited about refresh rates, and they still are to this day, worrying about frame rates and all these other things. And that helped propel, LCDs, along with weight savings, size getting bigger, and lower prices, to become the leader that they are today. And plasmas, of course, have gone the way of the dodo because of it. So will QDEL's TVs, if they come to market, or when they come to market, will they be able to capture the public's attention enough to supplant OLEDs or something like that? I don't know. I guarantee you they're going to lean way into this. It can't burn in.
Oh, yes.
They'll lean into that, even though burn-in really isn't that much of an issue anymore with any of the display technologies that we have out there. But they will definitely market that because it's an easy thing for the public to understand.
And they can market the color volume, because that is going to be where it has an advantage. Just in objective terms, you can point at a graph and be like, yeah, this can do the full Rec 2020. It can do beyond Rec 2020. This can do.
But does the public care about that? That's the thing.
But I mean, that is one of the things you can market. Look at these two graphs, and this one's bigger and more colorful. It's laser-like in its accuracy as far as narrow bandwidth color goes. But this is pretty much all predicated on, as far as getting businesses on board, this is the display technology I'm going to use in my next phone that I'm designing, my next tablet, my next laptop. That is all predicated on actually getting the cost down, because that's what the businesses care about. They're like, which one costs less? And where QDEL is genuinely exciting is they have been chasing after a display technology that you can inkjet print. That has been the holy grail, because it is so much cheaper and faster to manufacture a display that way. And it just hasn't happened, not at big commercial scale. It's just not the way we're making displays. But that idea is something they've been chasing after. And QDEL is the one that can do it, because all of the light-producing things are little liquid drops of quantum dots, and that can absolutely be inkjet printed. And you have to create a TFT lattice, an electrical lattice behind it, but then the actual light-producing things, they don't have to be picked and placed like micro LEDs. They don't have to be chemically grown like liquid crystal shutters. You can just inkjet print quantum dots all day long. And that is the thing that everything is hanging on. Plus, if you can inkjet print them and they are thinner, lighter, use less power, all of those things are very compelling for a lot of manufacturers to be like, yeah, we want to put that in our displays, even if it's not as bright, even if it's a little bit less bright. They're like, no, it's so much, it costs so much less. They're absolutely going to go for it. So there's a lot of caveats. There's a lot of things have to come to pass. But QDEL is exciting for those reasons.
Yeah. If you want to know, Gary, whether or not this technology is going to take off and it's going to become a viable contender, you got to look at the price. That's what it comes down to.
And of course, now the prototypes aren't cheaper, but if they can get that inkjet printing going at mass scale, it's gonna be cheaper.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then it will be. I mean, that's how LCDs really won, was that they were able to get bigger, faster for less. That's what really happened. Gary noticed something a little bit strange with his Emotiva UMC 200 7.1 channel pre-pro from 2013. You're still waiting for that update that's going to give it the thing that they promised it was going to have? Yeah.
They didn't promise too much with that one.
Strange.
More basic unit, yeah.
Whenever he first powers it on, it starts out silent, but then the volume level slowly rises back up to whatever the volume level was the last time he powered it off. Mm-hmm. With all his other audio gear, it either plays at the last used volume run away, plays at a preset volume level that it always goes back to after every power cycle, or it's muted for a second or two when it first powers on, but then it unmutes all at once. But the Emotiva UMC 200 does the swooping up gradual rise in volume, so he's just curious if you have any idea what that is and what's going on there. If it's new, it means that there's something inside that thing that is...
Oh no, it's not new. That's just the way it works.
Okay. And in which case, if it's new, there's something in there that's either broken or breaking that's causing it to happen. If it's not new, it was a conscious choice that they thought was cool. So I think it's according to what Rob just said, it's the second one.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a case of one of the things they touted on the UMC was that it was an all analog volume structure. There's no digital circuitry anywhere in that volume structure. So that is like a capacitor charging up as it powers on. Like that's kind of literally happening in there. If it's a fully analog structure in there, then yeah, there's anything that's going to be digital is going to be instant on, instant off. You might have a muting circuit in there that's like, okay, for a short amount of time, keep it muted until everything has charged up and powered on, and then unmute. But if it's fully analog, which is how they touted it, then you're literally hearing the capacitors charge up.
Okay. What time is it?
I know. Well, I mean, if we're doing 2 hours, we have 20 minutes.
Late.
Yeah, we started very late. So whatever you want to do, I'll carry on for 2 hours if you need to go.
Well, let me just check my phone real quick. I'm waiting for my wife to text me.
We can start in on Leighton's. If you need to go in the middle of it, that'll be all right.
I don't know. Leighton says he feels better about going through with his 85-inch Sony X90CL purchase after our comments last week. No regrets, and he's excited about the substantial increase in the screen size over the 50-inch Pioneer Kuro plasma it's replacing. He has obviously heard it said that the true successor to the Kuro plasmas is OLED, but as we correctly pointed out, at the 85-inch size, the X90CL on clearance, now that the Bravia 5 series has replaced it, costs much, much less than the 83-inch OLED. So coming from his Pioneer Kuro to a full array local dimming HDR LCD like his new X90CL. If I have to say X90CL one more time, you and I are going to fight, Rob.
I didn't think it was that bad, but all right.
I'm done with this. I've said it like 4 times.
You can just say X90. We'll know what we're saying.
Anyways, I'm just going to say Sony from now on.
Sure, that's fine.
So there you go. So would his Kuro actually have remained objectively or subjectively better in any way? For example, Kuro plasmas were always slotted for the deep black levels, but even they didn't have literal zero nit black. There was a tiny bit of light glowing at all times that you could see if your room was pitch black around it. So is the out-and-out black level of the Sony equal, better, or worse than that? And then for peak white levels, it's got to be better than its Kuro, right? Being an HDR display and all. So what does that end up meaning for contrast? And what about near black shadow detail? Long story short, does a higher end LCD from today stack up better against the last of the plasmas than the general plasmas always had better black levels and higher contrast than LCDs? Refrain would have everyone believe. So, so you're talking, of course, about the contrast has to do with, how black it can get versus how light it can get.
Yeah, take the peak white light output and divide it by the black level nit level, and that is literally the contrast in terms of white versus black contrast.
Because of the full array local dimming, technically parts of that Sony are completely off at times, and there may be light bleeding through slightly, but it's I don't know how black the Kuro's the Pioneer Kuro was in comparison to like an OLED, but I mean, they're like you said, it's not dead black, but it's pretty freaking close.
And mathematically, it is tough because you're talking about something that's like, okay, pure black on this screen measures at 0.02 nits.
Yeah.
And then pure black on this other screen measures at 0.001 nits. And so if you divide, like, let's say they both had the same peak white, like one of them is going to, show you an order of magnitude times 2 as being, the difference in the numerical contrast. But in terms of visually, especially if you have a little bit of ambient light in your room, like visually, how different do they look? And the answer is going to be not very much at all. So yeah, just to go through them one by one, the sheer, okay, let's talk about like, there's two different types of black level that you're going to see on a display. There's like an all white screen versus an all black screen. And then there's like a checkerboard pattern or white lines next to black lines at the same time on the display, or, just a star field image where most of the thing is black, but then there's these little specks of white that are on there, right? So those are two different things. So in a pure black, the whole screen is entirely black. Your new Sony is actually better than your Kuro because it can just turn its backlights off. That's the full array local dimming. And it becomes pure black if the entire screen is literally black. It's actually better than your Kuro there. But in the scenario of the star field, where it has to have the backlights on in order to show you those little specks of light that are the stars on screen, it is slightly worse than your Kuro at this point. The black at that point is a dark shade of gray, and the Kuro was an even darker shade of gray. And neither of them is equal to an OLED where the black background is pure 100% zero nit inky black, and then there are these tiny little specks of light for the stars at exactly the same time. The OLED wins over both of them. So now when we're talking about that simultaneous on-screen contrast, well, this is tough because, yes, if you're talking about peak white level, your Sony blows your old Pioneer Kuro Plasma out of the water. It is 2 orders of magnitude brighter in terms of peak white. It is way, way brighter in fully peak white. But when it's trying to show black and white at exactly the same time on that screen, now you're just like within a little local area, right? It's one little local backlight that is like mostly black, and then there's one star in the middle of it. That contrast is just depending entirely on the LCD screen at that point, and that is objectively lower than the contrast that your plasma could show. And both of them are lower than the contrast that an OLED could show. So we are relying on Sony's processing of being like, yeah, we are adjusting the level of that backlight that's back there. And dynamically, when you're watching real-world content, there is no question that your X90 is going to look better than your plasma. It is so much brighter. The contrast... As images are changing on screen, we're not looking at just test patterns, okay? We're looking at real world content. It is going to look brighter, more contrasty, and Sony does an excellent job of retaining all the shadow detail, even if it means it's ever so slightly brighter, in an overall nit sense, but they're really good at maintaining the visibility of that shadow detail. I would argue better than your Kuro was because there was a little bit of black crush in that Kuro. So yes, I would say overall it's clearly going to look better to you in just subjective, does this look better or worse? But then beyond that, there's one last factor. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought here on this one. Sorry. Okay, whatever it was. Anyway, you're going to love the way that this thing looks. The other one was if you do have relatively high ambient light, because the Kuros were not great at maintaining their inky black level if you had sunlight coming in like from the side. The whole screen would kind of wash out, whereas the LCD does a better job of retaining what looks like a dark black level if there's light, like sunlight coming in from a side window. So that's actually going to look better.
All right. This is my last question I'll be here for. Eliezer, most of Eli's home
he
theater
did say
gear
he goes by Eli or Ellie. He's like whatever language you're used to, but he does go by. You were correct, Tom.
All right. Most of Eli's home theater gear is all plugged into the same Panamax surge protector, which seems to have always worked just fine. No issues whatsoever, but all of its outlets are occupied now, and he's slightly concerned about his relatively new SVS PC2000 Pro subwoofer. He has that plugged straight into the corner wall outlet and raw dogging it. Remember when we couldn't say that word, and apparently now it's just okay?
Seems like.
And raw dogging it like that has him a little bit nervous. There is nothing else plugged into that corner outlet. So is there a compact surge protector that we would recommend for adding for some protection for his SVS sub? Nothing with the cord hanging down. He's looking for the sort of form factor that plugs straight into the outlet and then provides good surge protection while covering the outlets right on the wall itself. Sony's suggestions. I'm sure there's something out there. I just want to remind everybody that almost every single subwoofer manufacturer says just plug it directly into the wall. Mm-hmm. We have fuses.
Yep.
There's fuses. It's fine. Plug it directly into the wall. SVS will tell you the same thing.
Fuses, definitely.
Yeah. And so there is surge protection in your sub. And while, yes, you're like, oh, I can buy this other surge protector. That'll stop me from having to replace a fuse. But now you have to replace a surge protector. Mm-hmm. And not only that, a lot of times those surge protectors, not maybe the one that Rob's going to recommend, but most of the surge protectors that most of us use, those strips and stuff like that you get, they'll still work after they have protected you from a surge.
Which they shouldn't, may not, ideally.
They shouldn't, but many of them will degrade to the point where they've sucked up enough little surges here and there that they will degrade to the point where they're not really going to protect your gear from the surge, and yet they'll still work. So I would rather plug directly into the wall and say, my sub stopped working after that lightning strike. I know I need to go, replace this fuse. Then just have a bunch of stuff plugged into because you're inevitably going to plug something else into this thing, and then have it not be protected at all. So it's up to you. Rob's going to suggest something, but I'm going to say just leave it plugged into the wall and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get the reaction of it's really scary. The first time it happens, there's like a power surge, or the power was out, and then the utility turns it all back on all at once, and your subwoofer goes pop. It's like that's really scary. But we want to put your mind at ease that your SVS sub definitely has a fuse in there, and if it goes pop because of a power event, that's all it is, and it's a fuse, and it can be replaced, and it's easy, and SVS will help you out in every way that you could possibly need in replacing that fuse, and it's really nothing to worry about. So if we can put your mind at ease, the simplest and least cost out-of-pocket thing for you to do is to not worry about this at all. Leave your subwoofer, your SVS subwoofer, plugged directly into your wall outlet, and it's totally fine. That fuse is going to protect it just fine. But if you are insisting, one thing that is kind of nice, actually, I am going to suggest for you sticking with Panamax, because they actually have a surge protector unit. It costs $60, so it's not the cheapest thing on earth, but it replaces the outlet in your wall, so this does not stick out of the wall at all. This is looks exactly like the receptacles that are installed in your wall, although a little bit bigger, so the box can't be a compact shallow depth box inside of the wall, but this goes in, replaces the wires inside of your wall outlet. But what Panamax does well is if this blows its metal oxide varistor to protect your gear, it will not let any power through after that point. So it is sacrificing itself and then continuing to protect your thing by just refusing to work after the surge has burned out its protection layer. Now, of course, this being wired directly in means that replacing it in that event, is a little bit more of a challenge because you're not just unplugging it for a regular wall outlet. So they have another unit that costs $70, which is the type that you're asking for, plugs straight into the wall, gives you two outlets that are on the side edges. So both of those Panamax models are available at Crutchfield, and we'll have the links. And if you are insisting upon it, I can recommend it because they let through the full 15 amps. They don't do anything weird to the electrical signal. There's still two outlets originally and still two outlets afterwards, and they sacrifice themselves the way they should. But there's actually no need to spend $60 or $70. You can just plug straight into the wall.
So it looks like there's 3 questions left. You want to just, we're about at 2 hours. You want to go ahead and
7, 8, 9, 10. There's 4 questions left. Yeah.
Oh. What? I said 3?
You said 3.
I wasn't counting this one because Matt. We could do Matt real quick.
Yes, let's do that.
As long as you can be quick, because this can be quick.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a couple questions left for next week.
Okay.
Matt found some acoustic panels being sold by Amazon UK. He wants to know if they'd be any good or if they won't actually do anything to help treat a room. They're basically 1 foot by 2 foot and 2 inches thick. They come in a package of 4 in white, gray, or black, and they are wrapped in polyester fabric. Price for the pack of 4 is 71 pounds, which threw me off the first time.
So let's keep in mind these panels are 1 foot by 2 foot. So this package of 4 of them is essentially a 2 foot by 4 foot panel, right?
Yes.
You put all 4 of them together, and that's 2 feet by 4 feet.
Yeah. So they are also. I remember him sending this through, and I clicked on it, and it messed up my Amazon for a while.
Okay.
Because I went to the Amazon UK, and they are fiberglass. That is that is the thing to. So when we look at panels, Rob and I, what are we looking for? We are looking for the lack of the word foam.
Yep.
Because there's only 2 things that happen with acoustic panels. They are either foam or they fiberglass. If it doesn't say foam and it does say fiberglass someplace, it's fine.
Now, they could be rock wool insulation, but yes, we're looking for not foam. We are looking for it is some type of insulation. And whenever somebody says, I found acoustic panels on Amazon, we're always like, it's going to be a foam panel. Because almost all of the acoustic panels sold on Amazon are foam, but these ones are not. These ones from Amazon UK are fiberglass. That is clearly described.
So, do these work? Yes. I don't have to see anything else about them other than to know that they are made out of insulation. Once I know they're made out of insulation, they work. And how do they work? They work pretty good. So they're 2 inches thick. So what does that mean?
So the thickness is the other major thing we have to look at. The material is right, so that's great. It passed hurdle number 1. If it had said foam, we'd be like, nope, don't get them. But we've passed the first hurdle. Yeah.
So how good do they work? Well, it's all about how thick they are, and then that'll tell you how far down on the frequency response that it will absorb. And there's charts all over the place, but the thing to remember is that 2 inches is kind of the minimum. Anything smaller than 2 inches isn't really doing much, but 2 inches is nice. If you put 2 inches directly against the wall, it does something, and if you want to almost double how good it is, you take 2 inches and then put it off the wall by 2 inches. Just gap it by 2 inches. And then if you can do 4 inches, again, you want to gap that as well. You don't have to gap it 4 full inches, but like 2 or 3 inches off the wall with a 4-inch panel is about as good as you can get before you start getting stupidly thick and having to really think about your life choices.
So
as far as
illustrate what Tom just said, I headed over to acousticmodeling.com, one of my favorite places, because you can plug in various thicknesses of insulation and then also plug in a thickness of an air gap behind that insulation, so between the back of the insulation panel and the wall that you're mounting it to, and get these graphs. So if we're looking at just 2 inches, no air gap, so you're just taking these panels exactly as they are from Amazon UK, and they actually say they're self-adhesive on the back, so the idea is to just pull off the peeling and stick them straight on your wall. If you did that, what we're going to see is in these graphs, we're looking at anything that is above 0.5 on this graph is like audible. It's doing something. It's absorbing some sound. If it's below 0.5 on this graph, it's really not doing anything that's going to be audible. But what we're primarily looking for is someone in 0.8 up to 1. That is going to be where it's really, really effective, very, very noticeable that it's doing something in your room. So if we're looking at just the 2-inch panel straight on the wall, it's like, well, it's basically 1,000 hertz and above is where it's really, really effective. And then it's still doing something audible down to about 500 hertz. So that means the 2-inch thickness is really just the vocal range, not even the entire bass male vocal range, but it's the vocal range. So when we're talking about I'm treating a podcasting booth, I'm treating something that's just for, speaking in, I'm just worried about a meeting room and I want to have it easier to understand people that are speaking to each other. 2-inch panels are okay for that. They'll treat that type of range. But if we're talking a home theater, we typically want to treat a lower frequency range than that. So if these were 4-inch thick panels, you could literally stick 2 of these together and make them 4 inches thick if you wanted to. So there we're seeing okay, it's really effective from 500 hertz on up. I would say even down to 300-400 hertz, but it's they're still effective down to about 250 hertz. So we're not quite into the speaker to crossover region. A 4-inch thick panel would not be called a bass trap all on its own, but this is definitely treating the full vocal range, including all the way into bass male vocals, the entire thing. And it's going to be really effective for specific reflections, your first reflections on your sidewalls or your ceiling, or behind your speakers on the front wall to catch that speaker boundary interference. A 4-inch thick panel is really good there. And then, as Tom alluded to, if you have 2 inches of insulation but then a 2-inch air gap, it's okay, it's not quite as effective as a full 4 inches of insulation, but it's pretty close. It's like amazing what you're getting essentially for free by just a 2-inch air gap. You'll notice that above 500 hertz, it's squigglier. It's squigglier than just 4 inches of insulation. That's because you're getting a little bit of sound bouncing between the back of the panel and the wall itself in that 2-inch air gap. But it's still all above 0.8. So it's all still very effective. It's just not quite as completely even in how much it's absorbing things back there. So if we are talking, okay, what would be a bass trap? Well, like 8 inches, a full 8 inches, that's getting you right down to like slightly below 80 hertz. So an 8-inch thick panel, whether that's 8 inches of insulation or 6 inches of insulation and a 2-inch air gap, those lines are almost superimposed on the graph that I'm showing. That is super effective. But yeah, that's pretty darn thick. If we're talking 6 inches, so this is like, hey, we got a 4 inches of insulation and a 2-inch air gap. That is like, I'm going to say ideal for Dirac art. Because it's like, 125 hertz is exactly where that's working. So that's why we mentioned those 6-inch panels when I was talking about Dirac Live Art. And then I'm showing the 4 inches there just so you can see for comparison. So yes, what you're talking about with these 2-inch thick fiberglass panels from Amazon UK, they are not bass traps. Definitely not. No way, no how. They are effective for the majority of the vocal range, just all on their own. But if we're talking a home theater, we'd want to basically put a 2-inch air gap behind them and then use them to treat first reflection points or behind speakers on the front wall, but they are not bass traps.
Right. All right, who we have left?
Yes, indeed. Let me get past that scroll there. So we got John on the list, we've got Henry on the list, and we have Julian. That is everybody who's first up next week.
All right, when thanking our listeners of the week, thank Mark and Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 131 patrons over at patreon.com.
For sure. Mark and Herb, thank you very much for those PayPal donations. We really appreciate your financial support. And everyone else, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you want to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, not just a one-time thing. So a big thank you to our 131 patrons over there.
We also want to thank those who sent us notes of gratitude, including Leighton, Matt, Henry, and Julian. Thank you for thanking us.
Yeah, I'll say the names one more time. We got Leighton, Matt, Henry, and Julian. Thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.